In this section, we are discussing another important concept, that is the difference between REST and the spread operator. The category of this question is JavaScript language, and there will be 4 relative questions we are discussing with this topic. From ES6 onwards, there are these 3 dots used in many places. Also, sometimes they are called as the REST operator, and sometimes the very same 3 dots are called spread operator. Why so? Let's check it out. We will begin with the REST operator first. Imagine a situation where you have to create a function called sum, which can take any number of arguments, and at the end it should return the sum of all the parameters passed to it. Let's try it practically. Here I am creating the function sum. Now I do not want that there are 2 parameters passed or maybe 3 parameters passed. What I just want is that I should be able to pass any number of parameters, and that should be received by this function. So for that I can use 3 dots, and this is called as REST operator. So I will say REST, for example, numbers. So this will create an array of numbers. Let's first of all try to display this array of numbers. Now I'm calling the function with 2 parameters, another call with, let's say, more parameters. So now as a user of this function, I do not have any restriction for passing number of parameters. I'm saving this and running the code here. So you see that we have 2 arrays now. One contains 2 members, whereas the other contains 4 members, because we have used the REST operator. Now if we want sum, we can put a loop and we can add the numbers and return at the end. So this is the purpose of using the REST operator. Also, in case if you want that here I give, let's say, A and B. Just in case this function has 2 parameters, but the first parameter I want to have a REST parameter. Let's try this and see what happens. As you can see, it gives the error. The reason is there is a condition that whenever you give the REST parameter operator, it has to be last. In fact, that actually means that you pass the first parameter in A, and for rest of the parameters you have this REST parameter. That's the significance of name called REST parameter. So now you can understand why we use 3 dots. Remember, the REST operator is part of ES6. In ES5, we have an array-like object called arguments, which does not work with arrow function, so we avoid. But let's just have a look at the arguments object also. Let's say we don't have any parameter here, and here directly I say arguments. I'm saving this, clearing the terminal. Now I will run the same program. When I say arguments is an array-like object, what it means is it is not an array. With REST operator, we are creating an array, whereas here with arguments object, we have kind of object literal, which has key and value. Key is the index number and then the value. Now in case if I convert this function into arrow function, it will stop working. Let's do that. I will say const sum is equal to an arrow. Now if I try to run, then it's going to give me the error. Arguments object in short doesn't work with arrow function. So with arrow function, anyway you do not have any choice. If you want that any number of parameters are passed to function and you want to deal with it. So now if I just say nums again here, the numbers array that is, and I display with console log, let's save this and I run it. So again, we are back to the working piece of code. Alright, so whenever you use three dots with function to deal with any number of parameters, then you call it rest operator. That is for the rest of parameters. Now let's talk about spread operator. As the rest operator puts the separate data values in one array, the spread does exactly the opposite. It spreads the array into separate data values. Let's try one more practical example to understand this. I'm creating one array here. Let's say let ARR1 is equal to, I have few values, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now assume that you have another array. This array has its own elements as well. Let's say from 6, 7 and 8 we have in this array. Now what I want is that all these elements in array 1 we need to put here before 6. But those array elements should be kind of spreading the values, not the entire array. Here we have 6, 7, 8 of array 2, and when you say dot dot dot, that is the spread operator array 1, it means array ARR1 is now passed as individual elements, right? There is no data structure given here. Simple individual elements are passed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is kind of spreading in the array, and then 6, 7, 8. Let me just save this and also display the array 2. I'll say spread.js. Now you see when I display array 2, it does display all the elements together. So in a way we have now separated those values of array 1 and we have passed to array 2. Let's take one more example for this matter. Assume that you have this array where you have various values in it. Let's say 4, 78, 90, 34 and so on. Let me say 4, 5, 9. Now I want to find a max value among all these array elements. The math.max function takes values separately. So ideally what you should do is you should write 4, 78, 90 and so on. That means you are going to pass separate data values, right? But here we want that this array which we are having now of values, we want to find the max from this array 1. If I write array 1 directly, let's do this first. Console.log and save this. As you see that it is giving nan, that is an error is displayed. Nan is basically not a number. So this is invalid way of passing the data. We have to pass it separately, or we have now the spread operator which will take care of passing individual values. So now if I run this, now we have the value that is the max value 459. So this is how the rest and spread operator, though they are three dots only, but with the context where they have used, they behave. Now let's discuss relative questions of this topic. First question is, can we use arguments object in arrow function? We have seen that it cannot be used. If it is the traditional way of writing function, it can work, otherwise it will not work. The second question is, which is the best way to create new arrays with assignments? That is assignment operator. Now, how will you assign array? Let's say array 1 is equal to array 2. If you write that, it's not a very preferable way because both array 1 and array 2 will be objects. So when you are assigning, you can use the spread operator. So the better way to assign array is using the spread operator. So you can say let ARR2 is equal to array 1. The third question is, how can you handle the n number of parameters passed to a function? Or the question can be, create a function which can take any number of parameters that returns sum or maybe max value or any other such calculative values. So you can use the rest operator to deal with such situation, which we tried in one of the example earlier. Though we did not try to find the sum because that's a very basic thing which anyone can do. But the idea is to deal with the rest operator. Fourth question, can the rest operator be placed anywhere in the function parameter list? Or there can be a code sample like this, One may ask you, is this piece of code valid? Give the reason. So as we discussed earlier, we cannot have rest parameter in the beginning of parameter list. We have to put it at last. If we have just the parameter list, it's okay. But if we have more parameters, then the rest parameter should be at last position because it is the rest of the parameters.